Welcome back to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive, seriously complex puzzle that's been making waves across global energy markets. The rumor that the United Arab Emirates might actually leave OPEC. I mean, for decades, OPEC has been the absolute bedrock of global oil stability, right? And the UAE, they've been one of its heaviest hitters. But lately, well, the math and the geopolitics are pointing in a radically different direction. So we're going to jump right in and look strictly at the numbers, the regional pressures, and the long-term forecasts driving this whole conversation. So let's just get straight to the bottom line. $50 billion. It's a staggeringly huge number, isn't it? And what it represents is the massive annual revenue bump the UAE could see simply by leaving the OPEC cartel. Now, when you're talking about national economies and sovereign wealth, a $50 billion gap isn't just some rounding error. It is a completely transformative amount of capital. We're talking about the kind of money that funds entirely new industries, builds megacities, and secures a country's economic future for literal generations. And as we're going to see, that specific number, it's the beating heart of the UAE's internal debate right now. You know, a senior advisor to the UAE actually described their core motivation to analysts using this exact phrase, strategic autonomy. And wow, is that a powerful term. It really signals this deep-seated desire to make independent economic decisions without being, bogged down by the constraints of a massive coalition. And we're already seeing the smoke signals of this realignment. Take the recent major GCC summit in Jeddah, for instance. The president of the UAE actually didn't attend. He sent deputies instead. For analysts who watch this region like hawks, that absence spoke volumes. It clearly signaled the UAE's urge to step back from traditional regional constraints and just forge its own autonomous path. Okay, so let's break down the actual math here. The current handcuffs on the UAE are pretty obvious when you look at the figures. Right now, they're capped by OPEC at producing somewhere around 3.3 to 3.4 million barrels a day. But consider their actual capacity. They have the infrastructure built, tested, and fully ready to pump 5 million barrels a day. I mean, they've poured vast amounts of capital into building up this infrastructure, and yet they're forced to just leave roughly 1.6 million barrels of potential daily production sitting right there in the ground. If you run the math at roughly $90 a barrel, that constrained capacity is exactly where that $50 billion figure comes from. And what really makes this production cap so agonizing for them is this remarkably low number, $2. $2. That is their incredibly low onshore production cost for a single barrel of oil. Even their offshore production is super efficient at just $4 a barrel. Plus, they're a relatively low-carbon producer thanks to some really advanced carbon capture tech. So think about it. You've got a country that can pull a highly desirable product out of the ground for almost literally nothing, yet they are being artificially held back from selling it all. They are leaving massive, massive profit margins on the table every single day. Which honestly brings up a super fascinating comparison. One regional analyst actually likened a potential UAE exit from OPEC to Brexit. The whole core idea here is sovereignty. As an independent, sovereign nation, the UAE has every right to leave the coalition if they calculate that the costs are just outweighing the benefits. Taking back control of their full production would let them take all those extra billions of dollars and pivot. They could invest them into much higher margin downstream sectors, specifically petrochemicals. Ultimately, they just want the absolute freedom to evolve their economy on their own terms. Now, let's look at the shifting power dynamics within OPEC itself, because the shale revolution has completely turned the landscape upside down. Notice how the United States is now the ultimate swing producer in the world, pumping a massive 13.5 million barrels a day. They're sitting very comfortably above both Russia and Saudi Arabia. This historic, game-changing shift in production has totally scrambled the dynamics of the global energy market. And, understandably, it places traditional OPEC members in a really difficult, somewhat compromised position. So the $1 million, or I guess the $50 billion question the UAE is asking internally is this. Why should they be the ones making painful sacrifices? Why limit their low-cost, low-carbon output just to prop up global prices, only to sit back and watch the United States and other non-OPEC players eagerly snatch up more and more of that market share? From the UAE's perspective, they're shouldering the heavy economic burden of stabilizing the market while their biggest competitors are out there reaping all the rewards. But to really get the full picture, we have to talk about the regional tensions and geopolitical pressures. Just consider the brutal math of regional defense for a second. This is the literal definition of asymmetrical warfare.
To protect its citizens, its booming business sector, and of course, its massive tourism industry, the UAE is forced to fire $4 million Patriot missiles, or $2 million Tomahawk missiles, just to shoot down $20,000 drones. I mean, the math there is just punishing. When your baseline defense strategy requires spending millions to counter threats that cost pennies, maximizing your national revenue isn't just some nice-to-have luxury. It becomes an absolute, strict matter of national security and economic survival.
And you know, those asymmetrical defense costs, they're heavily compounded by some incredibly intense external pressures. The region right now is effectively a geopolitical tinderbox. You've got the ever-present threats of blockades closing the Strait of Hormuz, which could instantly choke off oil flows. Then there are the simmering complex tensions between the UAE and Saudi Arabia over who really leads the region. Add in the constant looming uncertainty surrounding U.S.-Iran relations and the nuclear deal talks, and, well, it's a highly volatile mix. All these factors just pour gasoline on the UAE's urgent drive to maximize its capital and reshape its economy while it still has the chance. Plus, there's a real feeling within the UAE that traditional regional bodies like the GCC, they just move way too slowly for the modern, lightning-fast global economy. So rather than sitting around waiting for the whole region to agree on things, the UAE completely bypassed those slower coalitions to independently sign 36 different free trade partnerships. They are actively showing the world, right now, that they strongly prefer fast, independent action over sluggish collective agreements. And all of this leads us to the ultimate ticking clock, the race against peak oil. There is a very real, very deep sense of urgency building up here. Look at the projections. Global oil demand is currently sitting pretty high, right around 104 million barrels a day. But zoom out to 2040, and it's expected to dip to 100 million. And by 2050, as the entire world accelerates its transition to renewables, demand is projected to drop pretty significantly, down to 80 million barrels a day. The era of endlessly growing oil demand, it's coming to a close, and the UAE sees the writing on the wall absolutely clearly. Which brings us to this old but incredibly relevant saying, make hay while the sun is shining. Because the UAE is sitting on roughly 9% of the entire world's proven oil reserves, their prevailing logic is shifting dramatically. Rather than leaving all that oil in the ground for some future date where nobody even wants it, they want to front-load their sales right now. They want to maximize their revenue today while global demand is still well over 100 million barrels a day, and use that immense immediate wealth to build out a robust post-oil economy. But here's the catch. If the UAE actually pulls the trigger, leaves the cartel, and just aggressively pumps their full 5 million barrel a day capacity, it directly threatens OPEC's core purpose. At its heart, OPEC is a coalition of the willing, right? It's designed to stabilize global energy markets through careful, coordinated production regulation. If one of its most efficient, highest capacity members suddenly breaks rank to just flood the market, well, that fragile stability could literally evaporate overnight. Which leaves us with this huge, lingering thought to consider. If a major, deeply resourced player like the UAE decides that their own strategic autonomy and front-loading their wealth is just more important than the cartel, what exactly happens to the future of global oil production? Does OPEC actually hold together, or do we enter this chaotic new era of energy markets where every single nation is just pumping for themselves? It's a $50 billion question, and you can be sure the entire world will be watching closely to see how it plays out. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep your eyes on the markets.